You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
You're listening to the Niagara Wrestling Observer, your Niagara region source for trending topics, entertaining discussions, and pay-per-view analysis within the world of professional wrestling. Here are your hosts, Corporate Cappy and Kyle Masters.
How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of the Niagara Wrestling Observer right here on the Armchair GM's Sports Network. We are your source for North American sports coverage by sports fans, for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at NWOPod. You can like us on Facebook for the Armchair GM Sports Network on Facebook.com/Armchair GMs Network. Follow us on Instagram by searching up Armchair GM Sports Network and listen to us on our many platforms. Number one being Spreaker, using the Spreaker app. As well, you can listen to us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you're finding your podcast. Make sure you're searching up the Armchair GM Sports Network. And lastly, check out our website, armchairgmsports.com, for all things regarding our network, articles, podcasts, episodes, sponsors, and contributors. Everything is on there, so wherever you're listening to us in your most convenient way, make sure you are checking us out as well. I'm your host of the Niagara Wrestling Observer. I am your self-proclaimed greatest host. My name is Kyle Masters, and I'm always joined by my co-host. He is Mr. Corporate himself, Corporate Cappy.
Yes, absolutely. Always here to give my thoughts on AEW, deciding to, NXT deciding that they didn't want to make AEW look bad. They didn't want to make AEW
you go back to
look
that
bad
if you want
by getting off of Wednesday nights. So
okay.
Obviously NXT, we feel bad for AEW.
Well, now we know your original thought because you went with AEW first, so it's okay. Your secret's safe with me. But Corporate Cappy, how about you introduce? We have a third. Yes, we have a third. There's a third guy here. It's been a while since we had a third guest.
Yeah, third man, the Hulk Hogan coming in here, and I know how much he's a big fan of Hulk Hogan, so he's going to love that. So yes, we're joined by another guest host today. He is Matt Young, but he is formerly known as he's a former ring announcer and independent referee, as well as having one of the greatest matches in independent history, as we've earlier heard. His name is Brandon Sanders, a.k.a. BS. Thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here. The triple threat is now complete, gentlemen.
All right.
It is. So you're the Hulk Hogan here, Matt. Brand BS. So you've got a lot of shoes to fill here. And can you fill our listeners in on what your wrestling experience is? And can you please quickly touch on the greatest match and the one and only match you ever had in your wrestling career?
Oh, geez. Do we have to go there? But yeah, going back to the early 2000s, I used to ring announce for many independents, followed by several years of refereeing independents from all over Ontario to different independents in the United States and just kind of everything in between. And yes, the one match that we're talking about happened during my ring announcing days. A promoter had an idea that he wanted his manager to take over doing the entire show and kind of running it. So they had to get the ring announcer out of the way. So naturally, why not have a match between that manager and the ring announcer for the right to MC for the entire evening? And so what happened was essentially he came to the ring, with his two cronies, and they attacked me, put me in a corner, and beat me with a cane for about 2, 3, 4 minutes. I don't know how long it took, but it was a while, and he was pretty amped up, so I ended up with a whole bunch of welts on my back, and then threw me out of the corner, pinned me, and all of a sudden he was the MC, and I had the easiest night in professional wrestling history.
You know what? That sounds like a Vince McMahon type of match. You might have just given him an idea. If he listens to this podcast, Vince, if you're listening, that sounds like a match made for you, man.
Gross.
But regardless, Matt, sorry, I can keep calling him Matt. It's Brandon Sanders. Thanks for joining us today. So, Kyle, what do we got on the docket today?
Well, we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. We got to talk about the WWE. It's been a while since we had another episode, so we'll talk about SummerSlam Payback, and we have the big Roman news to get to, the big dog. coming back in the WWE. We talk about that. We have some Brock Lesnar stuff. Speaking of the E, we have the big news out of today with Vince McMahon deciding to be dictator Vince once again and punishing his wrestlers for engaging in third-party stuff. We'll get into that. And then we'll finish off with some NXT, again, moving to possibly Tuesday night, and Mauro Ranallo news. So we'll take our first commercial break here on the show, and we'll come back and we'll start off all that stuff. So, guys, stay tuned, and I'll be right back here on the Niagara Wrestling Observer and the Armchair GMs Sports Network. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Niagara Wrestling Observer. Here to talk about some WWE, kick things off. Really touch base on what we thought of SummerSlam and Payback, since they kind of were like a week apart from each other for whatever reason. But I'd love to hear Cobra Cappy's take on that. Pay-per-view being a week out of each other. What's up with that?
There just isn't any builds anymore. Like, I don't like. I'm trying to be, WWE, I guess corporate mark on this show, as corporate as much as I can on this show, just to piss Kyle off. But again, I can't even defend this. Like, I don't understand what the point. And Matt, you can agree with me. You've been watching wrestling a long time. You can't have a pay-per-view a week apart and have a proper build with it. I know it was called Payback, so it was essentially going to be rematches of SummerSlam, but I really don't understand the point of that. You got to let feuds have the time to build, and you have to have some sort of a burn with it. And if they just have a pay-per-view a week later, there's no investment in that. There's no way that you can you could have the greatest storyline on the face of the planet. You can't build a wrestling storyline in 1 week, Matt. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't think you can build a storyline in a week for sure. I think you could do separate pay-per-views a week apart without issue, provided you do things correctly. And what I mean by that is, you can't simply just rehash SummerSlam a week later and make some rematches, add Roman Reigns in there, that kind of thing. You can't do that. So what you need to do is you kind of almost need to do what you did with WrestleMania, is make it so SummerSlam's this one card, but then Payback is a completely different card. You probably can't call it Payback because there's not a lot of payback if the matches, weren't a part of SummerSlam. But at the same time, it's possible to do the events a week apart. But you have to have some build. Maybe even you could even advertise it as, okay, you know what, like Sasha Banks and Bayley take on Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. You could advertise that for Payback, but first they've got to take care of the stuff at SummerSlam. So there's a way to do it, but for some reason they just can't seem to think of these things. There's a whole bunch of money at Titan Towers or what WWE headquarters right now that they're investing in paying people, and these people don't have an original thought in their minds whatsoever. So for me, there's a way to do it, but they're just not doing it, and I don't understand why.
It's not like this is new either. They've done this before. There's time to think about what they've done wrong and learn from their previous mistakes, and for some reason, you're right, they just don't seem to want to do it or think of it at this point. And it's frustrating. I used to watch WWE all the time, and even now, still not watching it anymore and just looking at what they're doing. And it's still frustrating to me that how they have the tools to get it right, but it's like they don't want to use them.
Well, Kyle, I'll pull one out of your playbook here. You can have 30 guys in your creative room, but when it comes down to Father Vince making the decisions, it really doesn't matter.
That's horrible. I still can't believe that. He pays them, too. That's the thing. The guy that's being cheap with money lately, he's paying 30 guys to come up with ideas for him to turn down an hour before the show.
But as for SummerSlam, obviously the big topic there was Bray Wyatt winning the title back and then, in a week losing it. But he won the title as The Fiend against Braun Strowman. And then you had Roman Reigns appear out of nowhere, him coming back, which was interesting because we had all thought that Roman was taking some time off, he did take time off, and then he was going to pursue a career in Hollywood, which he got those pearly whites, but seemed like he's coming back into wrestling. Yeah, Roman's brand new teeth. So I guess that's one thing. But he kind of just asserted himself into the world title picture. And we go on to find out that he is aligning himself with Paul Heyman. So obviously that has something to do with Brock Lesnar being a free agent, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit. But so Roman Reigns is the big story there, coming back and asserting himself right away into the world title picture.
I'll give him props. Like I'll give him big props. I know the heel turn for Roman should have happened a long time ago, but I'm giving him mad props. I've been waiting for Roman to turn heel and to see how they were going to do it, and aligning him with Paul Heyman. I like and I don't like it. I like it because it's something new. They're trying something out to see if it's gonna gauge with the fans, and so far it's gauged. A lot of the fans, from what I've seen on Twitter, are happy with it. But then I've seen the other side of the fence where Roman really doesn't need a mouthpiece. The guy cuts promos well off on his own. So adding Paul Heyman is also like, okay, like what's really the point of Paul Heyman here, and why are they adding Paul Heyman? Is the other side of it too. Like, is this just the inevitable for when Brock comes back and then Paul Heyman's going to turn on Roman, and then there goes Roman back to babyface? Like, what's going on with that?
Matt, what did you think of the whole Roman heel turn, and do you like it? I know you're not a big fan of Seth Rollins, but both Shield members that are still in the WWE are now heel.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I think that they probably needed to do it a while ago simply because people just seemingly can't get behind Roman Reigns, probably because he was shoved down people's throats before he was ready for the spot. So I think people remember that. So now it's okay, let's change things up a little bit and let's put him with Paul Heyman, because the problem you're going to have still is that Roman Reigns is going to come out. He's going to do Roman Reigns things. And there's going to be a percentage of the audience that will cheer for him, where if you align him with Paul Heyman, they're not going to cheer. Everybody, in the crowd, for whatever reason, they hate Paul Heyman. Heyman can get guys over. He can say stuff that, riles up the crowd. He's a smart guy. So if there's a guarantee to keep him heel, it's to align him with Paul Heyman. And to me, that's why they did it. Plus, Paul Heyman's on payroll right now, and he wasn't doing anything. So the aforementioned cheap Vince comes out to play again and says, okay, well, we can do this as well. So for me, I thought it was a good idea. I liked the combination a lot. It's something different. Roman Reigns has never had a manager before. He's never had a mouthpiece. And I think, too, the other aspect is if you have Paul Heyman doing some of the talking for Roman Reigns, yeah, Roman's a good talker. But if he says less and does more in the ring, I think it makes him more effective as well.
Yeah, and I just don't want the inevitable to happen. I always look into the future at things. I really hope it's not. This is just putting Paul Heyman with Roman until Brock, they reach a contract again, and then they're gonna just switch it. They're gonna do flip the switch. I kind of want to roll with Roman heel for a while here. I don't want them to switch it as soon as Brock Lesnar's able to come back, because that's too obvious to me.
It is too obvious, but if you think about it, right, it might actually go the opposite way, where Brock turns face. Brock hasn't been a face in how many years now? So if you look at it, it could go the complete and utter opposite way of things, and Brock all of a sudden could sell a lot more merchandise. So to me, I don't necessarily think that Roman has to go face. I think it could be the exact opposite.
Well,
that Brock sees Heyman, investing too much in Roman Reigns and says, "What about me?" and attacks them both.
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean that would definitely get Brock over for sure. I mean, as a babyface, but again, Brock talking is just not a good thing. So, I guess we'll have to see. He'll let his wrestling do the talking, or whatever you consider what Brock Lesnar does. But anything else you want to touch on as far as SummerSlam, Matt? I know you watched Payback as well, but SummerSlam, I don't know. Same with WrestleMania. Just these pay-per-views this year, obviously they're going to be different because of the pandemic and no fans and whatever the heck this Thunderdome thing is now, with the crowd all the way around on their computers or whatever webcam or whatever it is. But for me, these pay-per-views just obviously haven't felt the same, probably because there is no crowd. It's not in a big time stadium or anything like that. But for me, they've been very lackluster, and I just really haven't been able to get invested in WrestleMania or SummerSlam for that matter.
I thought WrestleMania was really good. Parts of it were really good. I thought Edge and Orton was absolutely fantastic. I know there's people out there who don't agree with that, but I thought it was really good for what it was. But Overall, yeah. I mean, how do you, when you take away the element of 100,000 people in a stadium, in an open air stadium, or 20,000 for SummerSlam or whatnot, it's going to change things. Having been on the Indies and worked in front of some minuscule crowds, as we'll call them, there's certainly a difference between being out there in front of 5,000 people and 7. So trying to do that, and some of the stuff that they have to do in front of no crowd, it's impossible. Like, I couldn't imagine trying to do any of that stuff. I remember, and this is going back a bit here, but we had a guy who in one of these independents who he wasn't a wrestler, but he was a sponsor, and he wanted to be kind of involved in a show or whatever. So one of the things turned into, he wanted to get hit with a steel chair, and he wanted to practice it. Okay, like in just like a training gym or whatnot. And everybody was like, no, we're not going to practice that, because if you don't have that adrenaline, it's going to kill you. Like, the chair, it will hurt. Like, you won't feel it when you have the adrenaline in front of people, but like just doing it for the sake of doing it, like picking up a chair and hitting somebody, that's going to hurt a heck of a lot more. So you don't want to do it. So the fact that they have to go out week in and week out and work in front of no crowd, or people who, attend the performance center, that's an absolutely disgustingly tough call to do every week, to answer that every week and go out and try and further storylines without any sort of reaction. So I think, yeah, it's almost impossible for any of these shows to match what has been done in the past, or even allow you to, invest in terms of the characters. It's kind of going through the motions. Everybody's got, their time on TV. Everybody has to fill a role right now, but there's so much placeholding going on right now. And I think that's part of the problem, is you don't want to do too much, because, well, quite frankly, there's no crowd. Your business is half of what it was. So you don't want to do too much, but you've still got to give them something. So I don't envy them, because it's a tough place to be in.
Yeah. And I think Jericho said it best. He came out yesterday and he said he'd rather wrestle in front of 500 people, which AEW is doing with their open air concept theaters setup they have there, rather than 1,000 people on a screen. And he says it feels just that much better, even with the little crowd. Like you said, like even with the minuscule crowd, you still get, that adrenaline rush for performing in front of at least live people. And I think with WWE, with what they have, being a $1 billion company, and I'm not trying to like shit on them too hard here, but with the resources that they have, I think they could do something with their area that they're in now. So they've taken over the Amway Center. They have full access to that building, most likely like their entire parking lot. You know what I mean? Why not build something temporary in their parking lot, like an open air concept stage or something where you're allowed, obviously in Florida, to have a certain percentage of people in an open air concept. Like I think it's like 10 or 15%. Why don't you do that? Have fans come, have that kind of live crowd atmosphere, and if you have the Amway Center, if a day comes where there's horrible torrential downpour weather that you can't perform outside, you move it into the building and you do the Thunderdome.
I don't know. Again, it would be weird because they don't really have a setup like what AEW has, so it would look kind of awkward. But again, like I know that for me, even watching it on TV, the Thunderdome is weird enough. I can only imagine what it's like for professionals in the ring having to try to do that when you have a bunch of screens of people's terrible webcam video on the screens. Like
or having KKK parties and Nazi parties.
Yeah, or putting up just inappropriate pictures or whatever, just garbage like that. Like I just don't know if that's the the solution either. But again, it's what WWE's tried to do, and I don't like it. So hopefully, I mean, they've been adamant that they want crowds by the end of 2020. So if Vince wants crowds, he's going to get crowds, Kyle. You know that.
They have the resources. They can't. You're telling me they can't go out somewhere, not even just Florida, but somewhere in the United States where they could find a theater like the AEW has and set up shop there?
Yeah, but that's not the Vince way, though. He doesn't want to try something new.
No, yeah.
I think the thing is, right, you could make the Thunderdome work, but what are they doing? They're putting a bunch of people's faces on TV screens, but they're not allowing any sort of audio to come through, right? So when you look at it from that perspective, it's one of those things where you have an opportunity to get that feedback, that instant feedback that makes a wrestling event so good. But you know what? We're not even doing that. We're just putting people on a screen and keeping them on mute. And I get the concern is that somebody will say something offside or whatever, but I don't see how that's any different than when you have a live crowd there. Exactly. So for me, I just think you're missing an opportunity. You're going 50% of the way, but why not go all the way and allow some sort of crowd noise? I mean, it might be weird for people cheering, sitting in front of their webcam or whatnot, but I can guarantee if you're hardcore enough to get on this in the Thunderdome like that, you're probably hardcore enough to cheer in your house watching a pay-per-view too.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem with that is that they've actually had, even though you're not heard and they have their fake crowd noise, there's actually a producer, Matt. There's a clip of it of telling these people when to cheer and when to boo. Like, you're telling people to cheer and boo even though their voice can't be heard. That's what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're telling them to cheer Vince when he comes.
Like, this voice comes on. It's hilarious. Like, all right, we have WWE superstar whoever coming out. You know, let them hear ya. And like they're telling these people like to cheer and boo. Like, why? Just let them do a general reaction. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna force feed it, that's going to be problematic. And again, it's not going to be genuine, and you're not going to get any of the feedback that you actually need. So, you know, it's funny that they're doing that as a company that's always said we let our fans decide, you know, what happens and who gets over. And well, if they're doing that, they're certainly not living up to that credo whatsoever.
It's crazy. You need to go look up the clip after this, and it's kind of cringe. Like it's whoever, it's this fan that got into the Thunderdome, and he's videotaping like his computer of the setup, and then like a voice just comes in and says like, "Oh, we have WWE superstar, I forget who it is, coming out. Make sure he can hear you guys. Show him your support. Cheer loud." What?
It's like when you go to a live wrestling event and they say, you know, we're going live in 30 seconds, so let's hear you in 30 seconds. So like
that's
kind of
like
like
that,
that,
for like
but
the
even
look of
worse.
it, I guess. But like, you can't tell someone to cheer whoever. It's not like you can't tell them like, okay, you need to cheer this guy. You have to boo this guy.
Yeah, let's cheer Sheamus because we know we always love to cheer Sheamus on. But Kyle,
well, I was gonna say he's not. It's not just that. It's just it looks like some of the wrestlers are now becoming a target of being told what to do, and that is the big news coming out. Was it yesterday? Vince McMahon threatens to punish/fire wrestlers who engage with third-party apps such as YouTube, Twitch, Cameo, etc. So I'm going to read the article and we'll give our opinions on it. So Vince McMahon has reportedly issued an edict that will make a lot of wrestlers unhappy. It is being reported that the edict issued this week to the talent states that they cannot engage with outside third parties. They presumably includes platforms like Cameo, Twitch. Some wrestlers also monetize their YouTube accounts, so they may be included on the list. The story noted that McMahon followed up with a letter on Thursday saying that it was imperative for the WWE brand to be protected in every way, and talent have 30 days to stop engaging with third parties. Several WWE performers have accounts on Twitch and Cameo, and they make a good amount of money on those platforms. WWE wrestlers are independent contractors, so in theory, they would be legally allowed to do other things outside of work as long as they are not using their trademark WWE character names. It will be interesting to see how these talent react, and if anyone decides to contest this new edict put out on their by the chairman. So,
well, Kyle, let's get your thoughts on it.
Oh, I think it's complete, you know, no pun intended here, BS. That you're not letting these wrestlers do this. They're not using their WWE names, most of them. They're using their real names, so I really don't see what the problem is. B, I highly doubt they're making more money on these platforms than they are in their WWE contract. That'd be kind of sad if that was true. And I don't know why they would still be with WWE if they can see how much money they're making outside of it. C, you can't really blame them for right now, even during COVID. These guys are sitting at home working 1 day a week, and then they have 5-6 other days to just sit at home and do nothing. It gets down to the mental side of it, the mental health side of it. You can't just stop these guys from having fun, getting an escape from their WWE life. I really do not agree with this at all.
Matt, what are your thoughts on it?
I'm a bit torn because I get it from Vince McMahon's perspective in that he's got partnerships with Be a Star and everything like that. So you're kind of taking away from that in the sense that, yes, you can't do any of those partnerships or anything like that right now because of the pandemic. But at the same time, if you allow these guys to continue to do it outside of the parameters that WWE approves, they used to have to approve your media interviews, for example. You couldn't speak to somebody unless you got approval from the office. So if you start allowing that outside of those parameters, all of a sudden your partnerships, they become far less significant because you've got Rhea Ripley now doing cameo birthday shout-outs, for example. And so I'm a bit torn because I get it from that perspective, but at the same time, I also get it from the performer's perspective because, like you said, they've got a lot of extra time on their hands right now. And I think part of the problem is simply because of the pandemic, they have all this extra time and they're not traveling. They're not running the grueling schedule that they're used to. So what are they doing? They're simply finding a way to pass the time by playing video games on Twitch, doing cameo. There's far, far worse things that they can be doing that Vince allowed his wrestlers in the 80s to do on a regular basis in hotel rooms. So, right. So I'm kind of torn because I'm going, okay, you want to stop it because of the commercial aspect of things, but what are you encouraging them to take up their time with? So for me, it's hard for me to sit there and say, I completely I can't side with Vince McMahon on this simply because they're not really doing anything that harmful. And quite frankly, yes, Vince McMahon's paying their downside and they'll get their downside, but they're not going to get half of their house show. They're not getting their house show money. So they're trying to make up for it somehow too. So I don't necessarily think that, it's unfair to say, for them to try and make up the revenue stream in other ways since they can't do it in the ways that their contract details. Now, interestingly enough, what does the contract say for the talent about engaging in this stuff? There's probably no clauses in there other than outside media or whatnot, because there's no way when some of these contracts were signed that they knew what Twitch was or anything like that. And if I'm a talent, it goes one of two ways. It's a very easy argument in that from a legal standpoint, precedent's already been set because you let Zack Ryder do this for a number of years. He was able to monetize his YouTube channel. You had no problem with it then. So now you've got a legal precedent where it's perfectly allowed within the company and contractual confines. So I don't know that Vince McMahon necessarily has much ground to stand on just based on that alone. However, he could certainly ruin your career. So if you want to go down that road, continue. Just keep going on, and you're either not going to get a push or you're going to get released. And if you want to get released, hey, that's a perfect way to accomplish that as well. So there's so many different ways you could look at this, but I get what he's trying to do, but I think he's missing the point in 2020, given everything that's going on. I think he's still making it about him and the company rather than what the company can't offer the talents anymore financially.
I don't know. If I'm going under the brain of Father Vince McMahon right now, I think the only reason that he doesn't
him
want
Father Vince.
I can't.
That's weird.
Father Vince, all right? He is the be-all, end-all. Anyways, so I think he's just doing this just for the fact that he doesn't want people to grow their own brands outside of the WWE name. And do I agree with that? No. But I see from a business standpoint, he doesn't want people like Zack Ryder getting over on the internet and basically forcing himself into getting over on television if Vince doesn't want to push him on TV to begin with and doesn't want him going out and trying to further his career, going outside of the WWE creative zone, which again, if you want to try to build your own brand and do that, I mean, I don't see a problem with it. But as far as Vince's perspective of it, he wants to push who he wants to push and doesn't want somebody trying to further themselves and trying to, get a push in that regard by going and making a YouTube or a Twitch or anything like that. So I don't agree with what he's doing at all, but I think that's the reason why he's doing it. He doesn't want people making money off of their WWE name when it's not really affiliated with WWE.
Their real names.
But people know them from their WWE characters, so that'd be the problem. If we'll just use a guy like AJ Styles. If he was going out there and saying he was AJ Styles, there's the problem. If he's going out there and saying he's Alan Jones, then that's fine. Yeah, I don't agree with what Vince did, but I'm trying to I'm trying to give him a pass on this, but I just can't. I'm trying to understand what his perspective of making this order was.
This should have been done years ago, and I know you couldn't have foreseen it, but a certain clause or something should have been done. And if if you couldn't have done it years ago, then you shouldn't be able to do it now. You're just pissing off the wrestlers who some of them are already pissed off with the environment that's been going around the last couple of months behind the scenes in WWE, especially during COVID. You're just adding fuel to the fire.
I don't like the micromanaging and that sort of thing, not letting them have their freedom. Like Matt said, they have so much extra time right now with not having the live event schedule and the grueling travel that why shouldn't they just be allowed to do whatever they want as long as, Matt said they're not doing stuff they did in the 80s hotel rooms. I mean, I don't really see the big deal of them having freedom to, go out and tout themselves.
The problem with Cameo? The one thing, Cameo, they're getting paid from this to tell someone happy birthday. That's not going to get you over on TV.
No, it's not. And I mean, look at how many other professional athletes and from other professional sporting leagues do that. I don't see that. I don't see the NFL cracking down on their players from doing Cameo.
You don't see Tony Khan from AEW doing that. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, sure. You had to throw that in there. Yeah, you had to throw that in. But this whole thing just seems shady to me, and I really think Vince is going to get a lot of backlash from this because I don't think in 2020 the people who do this are really going to take this lightly.
There's a certain irony here, guys, and that irony is that Vince McMahon works so hard to end kayfabe when right now he essentially wants them to, act like kayfabe still exists and only be the WWE character of Seth Rollins, for example. You can't be that guy outside of it. So for me, it's just funny. There's a certain irony that he wants kayfabe to exist because it benefits him now, but when it came to, trying to get decommissioned from being a live sporting event and, all those aspects of it, he certainly was like, oh no, we're sports entertainment and these guys they're just playing a part.
Yeah, it is a shame that kayfabe is dead nowadays, but I think he needs to kind of realize that kayfabe in wrestling is no longer a thing, and I don't think you're going to be able to save it. You look at other wrestling companies out there, not just AEW, but New Japan and other wrestling companies out there. Kayfabe is truly dead. It's not a thing anymore, and I don't think it ever will be.
No, especially with the age of social media, it can't be. There's no way.
So I think he kind of needs to. I know he's kind of living in the past now. He kind of needs to catch up, and I think he's gonna. It'll do wonders for the company once he does. I'm just gonna leave that out there. But before we get on to any more things, guys, we're gonna take our last commercial break here, and we'll be right back in the Niagara Wrestling Observer to talk about some more wrestling with the moving of NXT to Tuesday nights, some Brock Lesnar stuff, and more Ronaldo stuff to end the show. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here on the Armchair GMs Sports Network. All right, guys, welcome back to the Niagara Wrestling Observer, right here in the Armchair GM Sports Network, here to finish off the show. Have some stuff to talk about in regards to the Wednesday Night Wars. Looks like they're sort of coming to an end, I guess. I think they're still going to be, with the chatter that goes on wrestling Twitter every day, which is a crazy place. There's still going to be people going over the ratings, which to me the ratings really don't matter. It's just funny looking at the chart things and seeing what shows beat what shows. That's the funny part of it with me with the ratings. But update on WWE possibly moving NXT to a different night and why Vince McMahon wants to fight AEW. It's an interesting article. The strong, unopposed number of WWE NXT has many people wondering if it could be better for the brand if it aired on Tuesday nights. It's clear that they take a hit by going up against AEW Dynamite, and a move to Tuesday will give them a better opportunity to grow their fan base. Dave Meltzer reported this week on the Wrestling Observer newsletter that there was an internal discussion a few months ago weighing the pros and cons of asking USA to move the show. It was noted that Vince McMahon decided against it at the time because he felt that it could give the impression that they were backing away from the fight with AEW. Another issue is that leaving Wednesday night would only help AEW gain more viewers, and they would do numbers in the key demos that would be close to Raw and SmackDown. The numbers for AEW are important for several reasons. The numbers that help them get their new TNT deal in January, so those are very important to AEW. When it comes time for networks to bid on wrestling in a couple of years, they may look at AEW's numbers and see that they can get them for less money with a similar key demo for numbers. For that reason, WWE doesn't want AEW to grow too much. Meltzer noted that the internal discussion in WWE was before AEW started winning for weeks among women 18 to 34 in the week AEW won 18 to 34 overall, even with opposition. It's being also reported this week that the talks regarding NXT moving are ongoing, but there's no decision imminent. The next couple of weeks could have an impact on the decision to move the show, with last Tuesday being NXT Super Tuesday as a test marker. So, interesting. Very, very interesting. So, the rating also matters internally with both companies, but I think, in my personal opinion, I think it could benefit both. I think, yeah, you're going to get the AEW getting a lot more bigger numbers, obviously, with the NXT fans watching at the same time. But I think you're also going to get a lot of people who love both companies and love watching both companies have the opportunity to watch on two different days rather than at the same time. And I think both companies can actually benefit from this and will get similar numbers still. So I like the move. I think it should move to Tuesday, in my opinion.
Matt, what do you think about that in NXT?
I think it makes sense just because neither brand is big enough when they started to warrant going up against each other, right? Like the problem you're having is the average person, for the most part, like the average viewer, the casual fan, doesn't know who Adam Cole is, and they don't know who MJF is. So your problem is now you're basically asking them to choose rather than being able to consume both products and making a choice from that, or recognizing that both are good, both are valuable, and I'd like to watch both, but I can only watch one, so I have to pick. And they pick based on a variety of different reasons. So for me, it's kind of like, you know, if there's two pizza companies in one city, and you know, they have a choice where they can make all the money, and one of them opens on Friday, one of them opens on Saturday, the two busier days of the week, and you can make the money all to yourself by just cooperating and not going up against each other. You're better off to do that than try and battle each other and lower your prices and continually do stupid stuff to lure people in that really kind of ultimately hurt your product, right? So for me, I think it just allows everybody to have access to the product that they don't necessarily know everybody involved in. So that way they can get to know it a little bit more intimately, and that way the talent can get over more with a larger audience. And then from there, you can kind of figure things out. But from my standpoint, it never made sense for WWE to want to go against AEW. It made sense for them, if you want to go on a network, put it on a network, but do it on Tuesday when you're all by yourself, So that way people can start recognizing your talent on NXT, because that's the breeding ground for Raw and SmackDown, apparently. So why not have a bigger audience watch those guys? To me, that's where the whole mistake lies, is why would they go up against AEW? They shouldn't care about AEW for the most part, other than, hey, you know what? Let them make more wrestling fans that will tune into our product as well, because wrestling people are not tuning in because of WWE. So let there be an alternative. Let there be more fans. And then down the road, if you have to squash them or worry about a competition, do it then. But let them create fans and drive your business as well.
Yeah, I like that point a lot, Matt. And again, like, there's only so much wrestling fans that are going to be tuning in, like you mentioned. So why not, expand the audience? Again, like, AEW and NXT together, I don't know that they're going to drive the overall ratings up by both them going against each other. But if you put them on separate days, then you have so much wrestling to watch. Obviously, SmackDown's not on Tuesdays anymore. So we were used to having, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday for WWE for the longest time. So if people were used to that, why can't they just go back to that and have NXT take the place of where SmackDown Live was on Tuesdays? So I really don't see a big deal with it. And again, if you have, Monday Raw, Tuesday NXT, Wednesday AEW, and Friday SmackDown, like, I don't really see a problem with that. And it'll get more eyes on just professional wrestling or sports entertainment in general, Kyle.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, yeah, like I said in the beginning, it definitely benefits both companies. And say, like, you're a fan who only watches one of them, it's easier on the eyes. Or if you were a guy that, maybe doesn't watch Raw or SmackDown, right, and you really loved what NXT produced and AEW produced, it's easier for you. Because I've seen a lot of fans out there who would be so conflicted on Wednesdays, and would have to, like, tape one show and watch the other one live, and then being forced to rewatch the taping on Thursday, rather than giving his viewership, which both companies care for, on two separate nights. You know what I'm trying to say here? Mm-hmm. It's a lot easier on the wrestling fans' eyes as well, having it on two separate nights and enjoying both those companies, because I know there's a lot of people out there who enjoy both. Or if you just enjoy one, or say you're the odd one who enjoys Raw and SmackDown, not NXT and AEW, you have the day gap in between all three shows now. So I mean you already had before, but it's just it's so much easier for them to split. But there's going to be the wrestling goons out there still going to think this is going to be a war, even though I really don't think it should be considered a war anymore.
You should be thankful it's not.
The guys' grocery games wars are still on, though.
Yeah.
It should have never been a war. One of the companies was new and starting from scratch. It can't be a war when they're trying to get over their talent and their storylines and everything that they're trying to do. It can't be a war at that point. It's one of those things where everybody wanted to make it into something it wasn't, because the last time wrestling had a huge boom was in the late 90s when they had the Monday Night Wars, and everybody wants that nostalgia again. And I'm not sure it's good for the business. I mean, it certainly set the business back 15, 20 years, because that's how long it's taken for viable competition to come around again. So from my standpoint, I just think it would be a bad decision. And it hurts creativity as well. So there's no war. It's just one of those things where everybody's trying to make something out of nothing. And Vince was trying to put AEW out right away for some reason. Well, mainly because he had to increase his wrestler salaries.
But, I think it's a good scenario for both. But, Kyle, what's the next news on the docket?
Well, speaking of AEW and WWE, I guess, Brock Lesnar, I guess, if everyone's not heard, he is a free agent, but probably not for long. I have some backstage news on Brock Lesnar's WWE status and AEW rumors. So right off the bat, if you're looking to see Brock Lesnar pop up in AEW, the chances of happening that are slim. A WWE source has told the Wrestling Observer newsletter that it makes no sense to sign Lesnar to a new deal right now from the WWE, and the only reason to sign him right now would be to keep him away from going to AEW. There's a belief in WWE that Lesnar could and probably would try to use AEW as a leverage, but the belief is that AEW would not want to pay him anything near his price tag, since it doesn't make sense for them to spend that kind of money. Meltzer did note that it would only make sense to use Lesnar on a Saudi Arabia show or WrestleMania. And the belief right now is that the Saudi Arabia show that was scheduled won't happen this year because of the pandemic. Hopefully not. I'm also hoping so. But it's awesome. It's actually know that Chris Jericho had an interview with Sportskeeda this week, and he really doesn't think Lesnar is a free agent. Jericho says I think it's just another one of the dances that Vince and Brock like to have when Brock's contract expires. Vince lets it expire, and they stay away from each other until the next Saudi Arabia show or the next show that has people in the crowd or WrestleMania, whatever it may be. So I don't think Brock is really a free agent in this sense of the word. I just think he's currently not under contract right now. It's also worth noting, too, that there's like a weird rumor going around that Dana White wouldn't mind signing the UFC fight of Jon Jones and Brock Lesnar, but then it was said that Brock Lesnar has no plans on coming back to the UFC octagon anytime soon. So he's a free agent, but I highly doubt he's going anywhere other than WWE. He's gonna use that AEW leverage for sure. Even though I don't think that's gonna work. I literally don't think that's a good leverage because AEW is not gonna pay Brock Lesnar whatever he's gonna ask.
Matt, what do you think of that?
I think it would have been the greatest thing ever if Brock Lesnar showed up at Slammiversary on Impact, but that's that's just me. That would have been the greatest thing ever.
The wrestling world would have exploded if that ever happened. Wrestling Twitter would shut down because I don't think you could contain the amount of tweets that would be sent out at that time.
No, exactly. It would have been it would have been the best thing ever. And even just do it as like a one night deal, right? Just to get so many eyes on your product and get everybody talking about you. But, opportunity missed, I guess. And they probably couldn't afford it because they probably have to pay for one night what they pay the entire roster. So and that's not a knock because I know they're paying guys reasonably well, but it's just that's how much Brock makes in a given night, right? So for me, I just think it's one of those things where UFC is definitely not an option because he would have gone down that road already when his contract expired in the past. Now that he's getting older, it doesn't make him a better fighter by far. So he's certainly not going to go down that road. And given it's been 10 years since he's been punched in the face for real, why would you do that, right? It just doesn't make sense. So, yeah, I would definitely think that it's only a matter of time. And, I mean, Brock Lesnar makes enough money that he doesn't have to re-sign instantly. He could sit at home for 6 months and live off of the interest.
Hey, fall's coming, he's a farmer. He's got to make sure his crops are doing well and he harvests. So maybe that's what he's doing.
I mean, as long as he's got enough money to buy bullets for hunting, he's good to go, right? So I mean, that's essentially what it comes down to. So I think for him, he's just going to wait it out until things get better. And for Vince, why spend the money? And for Tony Khan, it just makes absolutely no sense to invest in the money in Brock Lesnar because it's going to be a lot of money. And all of a sudden, so Brock comes in, you've been building guys up for how many months now, right?
Yeah.
And then he comes in and what's he going to do? Squash John Moxley?
Yeah, he's not going to come and have like a 25-minute wrestling match. That's not what he's about.
No, he's going to come in. He's going to squash John Moxley because if you're bringing him in, you better put him over. You better give him the strap because otherwise, what's the point in the investment? So, to me, it just doesn't make sense for anybody else or for Brock to do business elsewhere. So why bother? Just wait it out, do your thing. And I think that Jericho and his relationship probably don't help the cause for AEW either. So. To me, it's all about he's going to end up back there, and it's much ado about nothing other than, hey, there's an option, I suppose, for the first time in a while that Brock Lesnar is a big free agent and could go somewhere else. But really, in reality, I'm not sure why he would want to either.
It doesn't fit in AEW. He doesn't fit with their producing. He doesn't fit with their touting out as what kind of company they are. They're a company that focuses a lot more on the wrestling as opposed to storyline. And they do. I'm not saying they don't focus on storyline, but their main goal is to produce a very good wrestling match. They're not looking for a guy to come in and do 10-second squash matches every time he has a match or a big marquee match. That's not their thing.
Well, tell Mike Tyson that, because they had him on, what was it, a month or two ago?
Can you give that up? That was one night, and it was for literally a publicity stunt. Not like WWE has ever done that, right?
No, never.
Yeah,
but as Matt said, yeah, I don't think Brock Lesnar is going to go back to UFC and get punched in the face for real. If you want to do that in WWE, just have a match with Nia Jax. I'm sure she'll give him a bloody nose for real, because she seems to do that to everybody. But regardless of that, I don't see him going back anywhere besides WWE. And if he doesn't want to go back to WWE, I'm sure he has enough money right now. Like Kyle said, he can just sit on his farm and do whatever. Like, he showed up on that one Raw and just read a magazine in the back the whole time and told Paul Heyman to go get him a steak and refused to come out to the ring. So I'm sure Brock Lesnar won't be too upset if he's not in AEW, UFC, or WWE, or Impact for that matter, for the foreseeable future. I'm sure he'll be back in 2021 if he wants to.
What great booking that was, eh? He just got to sit around, read a magazine. Unbelievable. To think you wasted one of the dates in his contract for that. It's unbelievable. But
that must have been a nice $2 million magazine he was reading.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I look at it and I'm like, talk about a good investment in money right there. I mean,
it was ratings, man. Vince sent him over in his private jet. It was great. It worked out well.
Don't get me wrong. I'm sure Brock was not complaining about the booking that night. What do you mean I don't have to actually go do anything? I can just sit here all night on camera? Yeah. Okay, I'm in. Sign me up, right? Like, it's mind-numbing.
Only Brock can get away with that, but that's a discussion for another day. Kyle, what else we got?
Well, I asked Matt here. Matt, have you been keeping up with AEW at all, or been watching before I get into this next topic here?
Yeah, I have been for the most part.
Okay, so we have All Out obviously happening tonight. Their big pay-per-view, which is touted as their you know what, Corporate Cappy, you can go take a nap while me and Matt talk about some good wrestling.
Okay, perfect.
But yeah, it's being touted as, like, obviously All Out is their WrestleMania. I was part of the Tony Khan press conference call 2 days ago. I got to benefit from that, so that was awesome. He did talk about All Out. Like, he talked about All Out basically being like their WrestleMania because of the history. Obviously, this will mark the 2-year anniversary of All In, the big wrestling pay-per-view that was constructed by 4 wrestlers, and it's going to be the 1-year anniversary of the first All Out and how successful that was. So there's a big night tonight. What's the one match you're looking forward to the most on All Out's card tonight?
Anything involving MJF is something I traditionally absolutely love right now. Just the guy is just so good at what he does, and the fact that he maintains that character outside of the ring, anything he does right now is just on the top of my must-see TV list for wrestling. And it's kind of funny because we were talking earlier about how kayfabe's dead or whatever, right? But he's the guy who carries the character everywhere with him, back in the day. So for me, I absolutely love MJF and everything about him. So there's the match right there for me.
He is literally one of the greatest heels. Like, he does it everywhere, and he does not care. The one thing he does, and he's known for on wrestling Twitter, if you tag him in a tweet, he for some reason just instantly blocks you.
Yep.
He's just like, nope, you're blocked. Don't tag me.
Which is awesome. I mean, again, he plays the heel so well. So for me, I hope he wins, because I'm not a big Jon Moxley fan at all. So I just think that there's more eyes to be gained from MJF. Maybe not today, but down the road with him at the top of the company. But I mean, at the same time, how do you take it away from Moxley at this point when he was just PWI's number 1 in the top 500, right? So for me, it's one of those things where it's probably not MJF's time yet, but it's his time to show that he belongs.
Well, Matt, I'm going to give you a little bit of an exclusive here. So the people that do the theme song for this podcast, Worth the Pain, is my buddy Darren, who I met through Twitter, and he has a band called These Wolves. So they do the song for this podcast. Now, he released the other day, and he gave me the exclusive to release it. He released a cover of MJF's theme song with like a rap verse in the middle of it. If you're familiar with his theme song, you need to check this out. Go to YouTube, type in These Wolves MJF, and listen to the theme cover. It's been stuck in my head the last 3 days. It's so good. And it's so good to the point where MJF actually retweeted the tweet, and it's something he never does. Like, he doesn't go and retweet someone. Like, it was so crazy, and he put the fire emoji. So he really loved it. He actually, here's the exclusive, he reached out to Darren and asked for the full version, so you might actually hear it on pay-per-view tonight.
That'd be sweet.
Yeah, and it's a really good theme song. You're not going to be upset when you hear that. But yeah, lastly in the docket here, obviously the sad news of NXT losing probably their best commentator, and probably the best commentator I think in WWE, and Mauro Ranallo. There aren't many details available right now what prompted this. Ranallo was not on NXT last week or at Takeover 30. Corey Graves filled in for him, and Wade Barrett, of all people, came back and filled in for him last Wednesday, I think it was. Ranallo reportedly had to fly back to Canada to tend to some family issues. It's unclear if this is related, but the report earlier today is that Barrett was in talks with WWE about a full-time return to the company. So it's interesting to see that. But Ranallo is officially done with NXT. He came out with a statement saying... WWE came out with a statement saying WWE and Mauro Ranallo have mutually and amicably agreed to part ways. Mauro's passion and enthusiasm left an inevitable. I can't even talk right now. An excitement mark for WWE and its fans, and we wish him the best in his future endeavors. So apparently he's going to continue to work for Showtime Boxing and Bellator MMA, so he's not completely out of work. But NXT definitely losing probably one of the heartbeats of that company, because just his passion he has for calling matches and him telling the story in matches is what made me fall in love with NXT, made me love NXT. Like, listening to takeovers and watching takeovers, his reactions and the way he tells a story in a match is incredible. So they lost a gem in Mauro Ranallo there.
Oh, I thought when you said they were losing the best commentator, you didn't mention Michael Cole, so I instantly lost interest in what you were saying.
It.
But Mauro Ranallo, he's good at giving the story, but his Mamma Mia's were kind of getting annoying, in my opinion. I think he was kind of going.
That sounds like bitterness to me.
He was overselling some things. He was getting.
That's the point of a commentator.
No,
you can't just have him sitting there going, "Oh, look at that move! Look at the suplex there! Oh, and then there's
just
the
just go listen to Michael Cole, and you'll know what it takes to be a good commentator. Especially when he doesn't have Vince McMahon in his ear either. So everything's
definitely not.
No, absolutely not. But again, Mauro's a good commentator. It's going to suck for NXT because he was like the voice of NXT. I was interested to see Wade Barrett, so I don't know if he's going to be back with the company in a wrestling form or even on commentary. I'm sure he can bring a lot as well. I like Wade Barrett a lot, but losing Mauro Ranallo, I just don't see him really doing anything else besides the boxing stuff right now. I think he's comfortable with that. I don't think AEW necessarily needs him right now because they have Jim Ross. Maybe when JR hangs it up, Mauro can go in there, because those guys, you can't have two guys who call the same type of match.
Saying about him going to AEW?
No, I'm saying
okay.
Like for the people out there who, the rumor mill is, Mauro going to AEW seems like the logical thing, but I think maybe if Jim Ross, when he hangs it up, because you can't have two guys doing the same thing. It doesn't work. Him and JR are essentially the same type of thing. Well, no, just the same type of commentator with JR and more. They're the same guy. They did it once. It just didn't really work. So I think when Jim Ross retires, maybe he slides into that spot. But for now, I think him calling boxing is fine. But I'm interested to see who NXT replaces him with. They got some big shoes to fill, because he was, synonymous with the NXT commentary team. Matt, what are your thoughts on Mauro Ranallo?
I like Mauro and all, but this to me was just massively inevitable after everything that's gone on over the last year, right? It's kind of one of those things where I didn't think he was going to be back when everything happened earlier in the year, right? So for me, I'm very much like, okay, this is inevitable. They've been preparing for it, and I don't know that, he was really good, and he's not going to be able to work for long. He'll find many, many opportunities, but I'm also excited for a guy like Vic Joseph to get more time and on the tools and get better at what he does, because I think he's got a really good future, right? So for me, I think it's bad for the immediate brand for NXT, but I think long term for NXT, they're actually able to use NXT for what it's designed to do, which is build the next group for Raw and SmackDown, right? So, I mean, it worked for Corey Graves. He's done really well since moving up to, Raw and SmackDown. So I think it presents opportunity, and I think Vic Joseph's really good, and I think he could really do a good job with it. And to me, it's one of those things where he's a commentator, he's the voice of the show, but he wasn't there long enough, in my opinion, to really, cement himself as that voice. Like, he's not Jim Ross, who was on the mic for 15, 20 years, right? And then trying to replace that. It's a massive change. It's a massive pendulum swing where he was only there a couple of years. So for me, I think it's one of those things where that's kind of what NXT is, right? You're there for a period of time and then you move on. This time he didn't move to Raw or SmackDown. He moved out of the company, but somebody else will step in, and that's where they can begin in that training ground. So for me, I think it's just opportunity, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing for the long-term future of the company or anything like that. I just think it was kind of time. I don't think he was overly happy to be there anymore either.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, when he went up to SmackDown, we all know the debacle with that and the JBL bullying situation. Then we didn't know if he was going to come back to WWE ever. And then he came back to NXT and was able to have a good career there. And again, I don't think that they necessarily are going to – well, they're going to miss him for sure. But like Matt said, I'm sure the next man up there, they'll be training somebody to become the new voice of NXT like they do with most of their talent, as it is the training ground for WWE or if not WWE, outside of WWE. So I'm sure NXT will they'll do a good job of building people up, which they usually do. And once they go to the main roster, like the AOP was released, they really did they tried to build those guys up in NXT as this big dominant team. And then once they get to the main roster, Vince decides if they want them, if he wants to push them like they did in NXT. And for 95% of them, they don't, and they end up phasing out and leaving the company and going on to pursue other endeavors. Kyle.
Yep.
Let's be real. If you're a tag team in NXT and you get called up, it's only a matter of time until you get your future kids. We wish you well in the future, letter or phone call, because it just hasn't worked for any of those tag teams that they brought up. Aside from Heavy Machinery, and I think Otis is going to be fine there, but poor Tucker, I think, is going to go the route of Marty Jannetty at some point.
Yeah, they just don't really care about tag team wrestling. It's quite obvious at that point, but
which is funny because you used to be able to use it to get your next group over. You start them in tag teams, then they break up, and then you work the Intercontinental, then you can move up from there. How many times was that formula done back in the day, and they just refuse to use it now, and I don't quite get it.
Yeah. It is actually a damn shame, but I love tag team wrestling. I'm all about it, and if the team works, I'm one of those that I don't think that the group should split up. Maybe if you see something in one guy that, hey, this guy could probably go for a good singles run, I'm cool with. But if they're good as a tag team, I don't see the reason in splitting them up at all.
I don't like that. Like the Rock and Roll Express, like how long have they been a tag team for? And they never split up. I mean, Vince's thing is he always when's the split for the tag team coming? Why does that have to be a thing? Why can't people just have careers as tag team wrestlers? Some guys are just built for that. I think it takes a skill to be a tag team wrestler. There's a lot more going on. Some guys just are better at that than they are at singles. I don't understand why tag teams have to be split up all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's all I got to say about that, other than Michael Cole being the main commentator on WWE, but we won't go there.
Well, on that note, I think we're gonna wrap the show up. So
yeah,
Hope everyone enjoyed the show. Make sure you're following us on Twitter, NWO Pod. You can follow myself at Real Kyle Masters, and you can follow my co-host at Corporate Cappy. And thank you for our new guest star here for joining us today. I'm going to call you Mr. BS. So thank you for joining us today, Mr. BS Matt.
It was a good time. Anytime you want to do this, let me know.
Oh, yeah. We're having you back on the show 100%. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Niagara Wrestling Observer right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. We're your source for North American sports coverage by sports fans for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. As always, I am your host, Kyle Masters. Again, you can follow me on Twitter at Real Kyle Masters, joined by my co-host at Corporate Cappy. You can follow him at Corporate Cappy on Twitter as well. All links for you guys.
No AEW people are allowed following me, but that's okay.
Alrighty. Well, all links for you guys to follow are in the description of the video version of this podcast. Make sure you are checking us out on the go as well, searching up the Armchair GM Sports Network wherever you're getting your podcasts. And thank you to all those who have and are continuing to do it so right now. A big thank you to all our sponsors. Help us keep us on the air and support us and support the network. Thank you, and make sure you're checking out your local sponsors as well, ladies and gentlemen, checking out our beautiful sponsors. And finally, thank you to your viewers out there for tuning in and listening to us along with this episode. This has been another episode of the Armchair, or of the Niagara Wrestling Observer on the Armchair GM Sports Network by sports fans for sports fans. Take it easy.
I came to play.